trying to get the Facebook to connect, because obviously we want as many people to participate as they can. And so I don't know if any of you, like me, have been watching JD Schulten's live streams the last several weeks. I've been watching a lot of what he's doing, and he live streams from his Zoom to his Facebook. We know it's possible, but so far I think Zoom has been having some issues with everybody, of course, flooding to use it. And yeah, Facebook has problems today. Jay Hughes said, yeah, no kidding. So I don't know if we're going to be able to get the Facebook, the Facebook interface to work, but we'll give it a shot. Hello, everybody. Amy, we got Amy, Gary Davis. Hey, Gary, Isaiah, Jay Hughes, John, Joshua, Janet. We don't know. You don't have to tell us. I'm just being silly. John, Judy. We got Katie here. Ramona. Hey, Scott. Sherry, Sheila. We got Stephen, Susie, Tegan, Vanessa, Zachary. I feel like you guys are so, probably most of you way too young to remember this, but there was a show on. It went off the air when I was like 6 or 7, okay, and I'm 55, so it was on 50 years ago. But it was called Romper Room, and the lady on the Romper Room would like list the names of children and look at the camera and say, "I see Jimmy, and I feel like that. I see Susie and Tegan and." Anyway, yeah, I am not seeing. Hold on a second. Let me see. Let me try this, Sherry. Sherry, let me know how. I'm going to take my earbuds out and completely unplug. It may create a horrible echo, but we'll see. If it does, we're going to have to go.
Is that better, Sherry, or is that worse? Is that better? If that's better, then I won't wear earbuds and hope that that doesn't create an echo. This is a pretty like rug and carpet and sofa heavy room. So I shouldn't get really echo because I'm in a room with a lot of fabric. Good.
I can hear you a lot better without the headphones.
Perfect. All right, cool. So, we are live on Facebook. Excellent. Hello, Facebook people. Like I said, this is the first time we've tried to stream to Facebook while we are doing one of these. We've done a lot of these virtual events, but we have not simultaneously been streaming them. So again, pardon our little bit of a learning curve here, but we will make it work. So exactly, Carrie, that came after Captain Kangaroo. Thank you, Carrie. I'm glad somebody else is an elder here. And of course, one more thing, the sun just came out from behind a cloud and I'm gonna get blasted. Hold, please, one moment. Okie doke. I wanna be able to see and hear. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining. I'm Kimberly Graham. I'm a candidate for United States Senate here in Iowa, hopefully running against Joni Ernst in the November election. If we make it, elder than me. Carrie says she's elder than me. And we have our primary coming up on June 2nd. June 2nd. June 2nd. So, but this year you can vote really soon. So you can actually mail in your absentee ballot request forms now. And then starting, I believe, April 23rd, they will mail out an absentee ballot to you. So I really recommend that everybody go ahead and go to the Secretary of State website, click on voter, and then you'll see how to do absentee voting, vote by mail. And you have to, it's a two-step process. You're gonna have to request your absentee ballot, get the absentee ballot in the mail, and then fill that out and send that back in. So that's how that's gonna work this year. And I really encourage you to do that and do not go to the polls and vote, even if there are polling places open. stay safe at home. So I will just tell you the small paragraph version of my life story. In case you are somebody who happens to be tuning in who doesn't know really much at all about me, I'll tell you kind of the short who I am and why I'm running for office. So the past 20 years, I've been a mom. I have a 20-year-old son named Max. And for the past 20 years, I've also been an attorney for abused or neglected kids and for parents here in the Iowa juvenile courts. I've also done a few other types of law for shorter periods of time. I did some court-appointed criminal defense earlier in my career. I haven't done court-appointed criminal defense in a number of years. And I've focused on juvenile court work for the last several years, and divorce work and mediation. I have mediated people's divorces also, and I'm a certified family mediator. As I like to say, I think the US Senate could really use a good mediator. So that's someplace that I think that my mediation skills could really be useful. Why am I doing this? Well, anybody who's on this event tonight, this virtual forum, who is a mother or a father will tell you that, you would do anything for your kids. You do anything to keep your kids safe. And I honestly feel that running for United States Senate is truly one of the top reasons I am doing it is because of my son. I would do anything to try to keep him safe. And I really believe that the leadership or lack thereof that we have in Congress is dangerous. It's dangerous to our planet. It's dangerous to the health and well-being of the citizens of our country and the people that live in our country. It's dangerous to my son's future. It's dangerous to all of our kids and grandkids' futures, and it's dangerous to our present day as well. So after the 2016 election, like a lot of people, I was disgusted by the direction that our top leadership and other leadership in this country was taking. And so for my son, and because of the 2016 election, and because of all the kids I've represented for the last 20 years, I felt motivated to run for office because I didn't like who I saw who was getting elected for the most part. And I believed that if regular working people didn't start stepping up and running for office, then we get what we get. We get what we get. And I feel like I'm kind of a, pretty commonsensical, pragmatic, progressive. I like to sort of label, if I have to label myself, meaning I don't just believe in sitting around and complaining about the way things are. I believe in trying to do something to fix them, if at all humanly possible. And so rather than complaining about the direction that our country's taking, especially in Congress, I decided, well, then you go try to fix it, Kimberly. And so I did. I found out about this event at ISU called Ready to Run, which is like a boot camp for women who are thinking of running for office. And I went to that boot camp in January of 2017 and decided at that time that I would probably want to run for this US Senate seat. I never liked Joni Ernst's policies or votes. I didn't think she was doing anything for the people of Iowa that was helpful to them. I felt that she was just beholden to corporate interests and to special interests like the NRA. And so I thought that was a worthwhile seat to run for and thing to do. So that's kind of me and why I'm doing this. But tonight we've set up all of these virtual forums with specific focuses, of course on purpose, so that we can try to have a decently substantive discussion about these topics. And this one tonight is called Paycheck to Paycheck. It's a forum about poverty. When I went upstairs to grab something before starting this, I went in my bedroom and saw this book on my nightstand that I've been reading that I really recommend to everybody. So I thought I would just bring it into the conversation as well. The book is called Heartland, a memoir of working hard and being broke in the richest country on earth. And it's by Sarah Smarsh. And it's a really, really good book. I believe she is from Missouri. I want to say that she's from our neighbor to the south, Sarah Smarsh, the author of this book. And it's a great book about, about the times that we live in, that you can work so hard and be broke in this country. And that is amoral. That is unethical. And for a country that at least that markets and brands itself as being moral, right? Being moral and upright, then I don't think we do a very good job of living up to that across the board. We can do so much better. There's certainly millions of us who do a great job of living up to that, whose day-to-day work is about lifting up people and is about, making people's lives the best they can be. But we have systemic problems here. We have systemic problems. We have laws that are problems. We have wages that are problematic. We have a lack of unions. We don't have enough unions. We don't have strong enough unions because that's been eroded over time. And unions is one thing that builds up the middle class, right? And allows people to have better jobs with better benefits and wages. So a lot of this is systemic. And so we wanted to have a forum especially about this. Okay. And make sure that if you have any questions as we go along, I believe that there is a QA. Let me see if we already have. I don't see anything over there yet. I'm seeing a QA on my side. I'm seeing a QA section. So I think you can drop questions in there. And so please do that as we go along. So I'm going to introduce our guest that we have with us tonight. It's Jessica Butler. Thanks for being here, Jessica.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
And I'll just tell you like a couple of short sentences about Jessica, and then she can tell you more about who she is and what she does, because it's really interesting. And it actually also has to do with children and families, which is what, I do for a living and still do, by the way. For those who don't know, I do still work as an attorney in a recovery court program or a drug court program here in Des Moines while I'm running for office. And I think I'm the only candidate for U.S. Senate who is working and running for office. And frankly, I'm good with that. I'm proud of that. And I love what I do. So I'm good with that. But it does make for some really long days. Anyway, so Jessica lives in Sioux County. And she's a family advocate. And so I will let her tell you what she does as a family advocate. It's really, really interesting, critically important work. And it also has to do with poverty, because the families, mostly the families that Jessica works with, primarily the majority of them are families that are living in poverty. And so she has a bird's eye view every day in the work that she does to what those barriers are to breaking out of poverty, and what Jessica knows very well what families need to get out of poverty. And also, Jessica and I were talking earlier today, Jessica grew up in poverty. So Jessica knows what it's like to live in poverty. By way of background, so y'all know, I would say I have been really lucky. I have never lived in poverty, but I had probably a good 10 years when I was trying to get through college and working and paying my way through college. I'm a first generation college student. Nobody in my family ever went to college or law school, and I paid my way through myself, and have been working since I was 14 after my parents got divorced. And there were a lot of years when I had to decide, do I pay all these bills now? Well, no, I can't. And so which bills do I pay? Which bills can wait without getting something turned off, and which bills can't? So, I've never like gone without food. I've never lived in poverty in that way, but I've certainly had times when I couldn't pay all the bills. And so I had to decide what was gonna be paid and what was gonna have to wait. So go ahead, Jessica, tell people just kind of a little bit about what you do. And yeah.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Jessica Butler. Like Kimberly said, I live in Sioux County, Iowa. It's in the northwestern part. And I have been a family advocate, or you can consider myself a social worker, for the past 6 years for a community action agency called Mid-Sioux Opportunity. And what that means is just there's a lot of organizations under the Mid-Sioux umbrella. So we have programs like Head Start, Early Head Start, WIC, LIHEAP, which is fuel assistance in the winter months, weatherization, crisis assistance, things like that. And so in my daily work, every week I serve about 10 families, and we do weekly home visits for about an hour and a half each. And we do things like learn about parenting skills and talk about things like attachment and discipline and health and nutrition and things like budgeting, routines and transitions and sleep and prenatal care. And so, yeah, we do a lot of different things serving families, and we're a team. So, and it's a voluntary program. So yeah, it's been really great working there.
Awesome. So I think that there's a couple of, let me check real quick to see if there's any questions yet in the question thingy. I don't see any yet. Somebody has commented though that they've worked for Walmart for 14 years and they still don't even make $30,000 a year. And yeah, yeah. And Jen, that was a comment from Facebook from Jen. Yeah, Jen, we were talking about, Jessica and I were talking about today when we were talking before this about how these corporations that are making billions with a B of dollars in profits are not even paying their workers a living wage, and that the living wage to really have a fundamentally basic, decent life of, I always kind of say, a life of health and dignity, right? A basic life of, not a luxurious life of health and dignity, a basic life of health and dignity. One would need to make about $20 an hour in most places in the United States. Now, granted, you need to make more like 40 or something if you live in New York City, or you live in, you know, San Francisco, where you live in a very, very high cost, you know, where the housing is thousands of dollars a month for basic housing. That changes the equation. But, you know, if you live in a not super expensive place to live, like most places in Iowa, which, believe it or not, are not that expensive compared to other places, you could have a life of health and dignity on maybe about $20 an hour at full time. And what these corporations are doing is they are making these profits really, though, on the backs of all of us. Because what happens is when they don't pay their workers enough to really even get by, then those workers have to be on some kind of public assistance. And there's nothing wrong with being for the person who's on it with being on public assistance. But if you're working, your employer should be paying you enough that you don't need the public assistance because you have enough money to be financially independent without it. And so I was saying to Jessica that, you know, I think that we should propose legislation where if an employer is not paying wages sufficient to keep people off public assistance, and it's a large multinational corporation type of an enterprise, then they're going to get a bill, and they need to pay us back. They need to pay us back, the taxpayers who are paying higher percentage of income taxes than the very wealthy, and who are footing the bill for programs that shouldn't be necessary, because if you work, you should be making a living wage in this country. End of story.
Yeah, no one working 40 hours a week should be living in poverty at all. It's completely unnecessary. And yeah, like you said, these big businesses that have enough profit margins to be equally distributed to the employees would help prevent poverty, and, you know, people wouldn't have to have food stamps or be on Medicaid if they were paid a living wage. And yeah, with the cost of inflation and the cost of living, it would be well over $20 an hour.
Right. And I mean, now the little wrench in the the wrench in the monkey works? I can't remember that saying, whatever. But the kicker here is medical and healthcare. So what I mean by that is $20 an hour would probably be sufficient if we also had a universal single payer healthcare system, a la Canada, you know, the type of healthcare system where you just have that healthcare as a fundamental human right. You go to get care, you hand them your card, you know, your healthcare card, you walk out, you don't ever have a bill for that. You don't pay premiums, you don't pay copays, you don't pay deductibles. If that were something that we collectively thought should be a human right in this country, and so we paid for it collectively like that, then that would also help change the equation, because that would eliminate that huge expense from individuals or it would eliminate people simply not having access or not being able to either access or afford medical care. Amy had a question. I don't know if you can see those, Jessica. Amy asked if all the programs that you, Jessica, spoke about are government funded or where that funding comes from.
Yeah, it's MidSU is a nonprofit organization, and so most of our programs are federally funded, but there are some other sources of money that come in that are like based on donations and things like that. But the big programs like WIC and Head Start and Early Head Start are programs that are paid through the government.
Do you know, Jessica, if that funding comes, is there sort of a patchwork of funding? Does some of that money come from, if you don't know, that's fine, but does it come from some feds, from some states, some county? Is it sort of all mishmash, or where does that mostly come from, if you know?
I think that it's primarily from the state. I'm not entirely sure, but I just know that we get like one big lump sum at the beginning of the fiscal year, and we have to sort of make that work the rest of the year.
Right. Yeah. And for those of you, Jessica and I were talking about that earlier as well, offline before this started, is that what I've seen in the last 20 years of representing kids in court and parents in court is that even 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, gosh, what happened 3 years ago? I don't know. Major change of administration in Washington. Even 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, if I needed, if my clients, if my parent clients needed, say, gas cards, because in order to go visit their children in foster care or something like that, they needed help with gas, or they needed help purchasing if like a family member needed help purchasing beds because they were going to start caring for the children until we could get the parents and children reunited, for example, we used to be able to ask for that. It was like a discretionary fund, and we could ask the DHS social worker, hey, can we get gas cards? Can we get this? And it was always like, sure, yeah, we can do that. In the last 3 years or so, by about sometimes April, sometimes May, I will ask that in here. Nope, we have no more money for that until the new fiscal year. So like they're just straight up running out of those discretionary funds so much earlier. And I think that's not only because those discretionary funds are more used, but because there's such a strain on the system, because so many more people need to use the services that it's straining the system. And then those discretionary funds are getting pulled faster. We have a couple of other questions. Sherry asks us to address the myth of trickle-down economics. Yeah.
Trickle-down economics simply doesn't work. It shows in our society today. Today, there's more wealth at the top 1% than it is at the bottom. All the money that is generated by the employees, the working class, they are the ones who make the wealth happen, but all of that wealth is going to the top. And so trickle-down economics theory suggests that that money at the top would magically make its way down, in the form of paying your employees livable wages or offering them things like insurance and protections and unions and things like that. And so it just doesn't work. It's not working now, and it hasn't worked in the past. So to continue on with trickle-down economics is to condemn people to live in poverty.
Yeah, I agree 100%. One of the interesting statistics that I often say when I'm speaking, to groups of people about why I'm running for office and what I believe is that about 40 years ago, which for those of you who are too young to know, about 40 years ago, somebody named Ronald Reagan was elected president of the United States. And Ronald Reagan was, of course it happened before that, but there was a fundamental shift during the Reagan years. And one of the first things that Ronald Reagan did was bust the air traffic controllers union. So the air traffic controllers went on strike, and it was a very famous event in American labor history. And he broke that union. And that was a signal. That was a signal to corporations in the United States that the federal government wasn't going to give companies any trouble if they wanted to, decrease the power of unions or retaliate against unions and so forth. And so about 40 years ago, no coincidence, the top 10% of people in this country controlled roughly 1/3 of the wealth. I mean, that's still a big disparity, but okay. Today, the top 10% control about 75% of the wealth. So, and that's the result of trickle-down economics. Is one thing that I talk about a lot is investing in people. And the reason I don't say free college and free healthcare and free whatever is because it's not free. Somebody has to pay for it. It costs something. But I say the word investments because that's what they are. These are investments that pay back. They pay off. They pay us. We invest, and then the economy grows because everyone is more prosperous. And so when I say we need to invest in universal childcare and we need to invest in this and that, and people say, well, where are we going to get the money for that? Well, first we roll back the 2017 tax cuts to extraordinarily in this country. They didn't need them anyway. That's for starters. And then I agree that we should at least significantly look into some kind of wealth tax. But I think if we simply increase the income tax to the level that it was back in the 1970s, when it was a much higher top marginal tax rate, that allows us to have the income to invest in other areas in this country. Amy asks how we feel about universal basic income versus a patchwork of social service programs. I think that universal basic income is an extraordinarily interesting and interesting thing that we need to look really hard at and see about potentially doing it, especially now. I tell you one thing, I think that right now we need to just implement emergency universal basic income in this country for the next 3 to 6 months. I mean, and again, I look at that as an investment, because that's going to keep a lot of other businesses going, right? That's going to keep this whole machinery going and keep our economy going to do something like that. Instead of, having people be out of work and then basically giving them a crumb, like in the recent stimulus bill of $1,200, period. Not $1,200 a month, $1,200, period. That's not even going to pay for someone to live for a couple, 3 weeks in the Des Moines area, I mean, with food and rent and utilities and all of that stuff. So I mean, that's just ridiculous to me. And my take on the corporate or on the stimulus bill is it was essentially a dressed up corporate giveaway. But I understand why very progressive senators like Senator Sanders and Warren and Markley voted for it, because they don't want to hold up people getting something, Go ahead.
My thought is I think UBI is really interesting as well, and it's being implemented in different parts all over the world. And so I think there still needs to be some work done on looking into it, but I think that it's beneficial from what I've seen so far. But as in comparison to different social services programs like Patchwork, I think that person said, I think that obviously programs like Medicaid and food stamps and WIC and HUD are all valuable, and they're all services that meet people's basic needs, there's always going to be a need for that. But we need to get to the root cause of why people are needing these services. And so by having a wage that is livable, that would prevent people from needing to have food stamps or being, having a single payer healthcare system. They wouldn't have to have, high deductibles and costs, out of pocket costs and things like that. And so we really have to address the root reason why people are needing these services if we want people to, get off of them. We need to, I like how you say an investment, and, investing in people's survival, I feel is not that of a utopic type of idea. It's poor people deserve housing, poor people deserve education, poor people deserve food. We all deserve to have our basic needs met. And so, this is kind of a little bit of a different topic, but there's a theory called Maslow's hierarchy of needs that indicates that in order for people to go up the socioeconomic scale, we have to first have our basic needs met. We have to have food, clothing, shelter, things like that in order for us to go up the ladder and contribute to our society. And
Right.
so, for example, if a child is hungry in school, obviously their efforts and energy is not going to be available to learn and pay attention. And so that just goes to show you that like our basic needs have to first be met in order for people to contribute to society. And so in turn, that being like an adult example is if a person is experiencing homelessness, then they are, and they're probably hungry. So it's like, what's the first thing on their mind? Oh, I need to find shelter. I need to find food, not I need to find, alternative, things. And so, yeah, I really like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs when talking about meeting people's basic needs and how we can invest in people and help them escape poverty and go up that socioeconomic ladder so that they can escape poverty and contribute to our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking into some statistics on education a number of months ago. And one of the things that I read was that the biggest indicator of, predictor, I believe, or the thing that was correlated the highest with academic success in children was not anything I would have guessed off the top of my head. It was household income. Household income is the biggest predictor or thing that's correlated with academic success for children. And I think it goes back to what you said. If they have unstable housing and they're moving around all the time and they don't have enough to eat, and if a child is living in that kind of environment that just feels very unstable, and understandably they're going to have poor educational outcomes. That's not their focus. They don't feel secure and safe enough to learn in a lot of cases. And there's always going to be that 1,000,001 exception. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that, the majority. But yeah. Okay, we got all kinds of questions backing up. Samuel asks, what about the trickle-down narrative posed by mainstream media? We know it fails as an economic concept. What do we do to address and combat the narrative posed by corporate media? Well, Samuel, I mean, the feeling that I get anyway, like being out there, so by out there, I mean, we personally visited over, I think, about 85 counties before we had to pull the plug on in-person visiting. So I've talked to quite a lot of people since last June all over the state. At least the people that I was lucky to talk to, I think the message is getting out there. And I think that's largely because of Senator Sanders' 2016 run for office. His run for office really made people aware of this wealth and income inequality. He talked about that so much. And then of course, again, now in his current just ended run for presidency, or suspended, I should say. And then Senator Warren as well, with her run this cycle, she talked a lot about these same issues as well, and that helped educate even more people about wealth and income inequality. And she was very, very loud and persistent, talking about having a wealth tax to try to right some of this inequality. So I actually think people are getting it. I think people are getting it, and people are understanding it more than ever before. Amy asks if, I want to make sure I'm taking these in order. I think I am, yeah. Amy asks if the problem trickle-down economics directly or fundamental shift in work due to the fourth industrial revolution. We don't have 5 hours, Amy. It's a great question. Probably my just initial reaction is probably, some of both, definitely. Like the answer to a lot of questions is usually yes, yes, some of this, yes, some of that. I think that's both things that you're mentioning are definitely contributing. Certainly the trickle-down economics is a huge issue, because when we do that, in our current with our current Congress, having the majority Senate and having Mitch McConnell holding up any of the legislation that we're trying to get passed to fix some of this stuff, I think it those 2017 tax cuts just exacerbated that whole trickle down problem even more, because what we did was we just went and gave permanent tax cuts in 2017 to extraordinarily wealthy individuals and corporations. And we gave minuscule, if any, tax cuts. By minuscule, I mean maybe nothing, maybe a couple $100 over the course of a year to lower and middle income people. But what a lot of people don't know is that those middle and lower income tax cuts are set to automatically expire in a few more years. And they did that on purpose. The GOP majority Senate did that on purpose so that they could go back to their constituencies and say, I voted for a tax cut for middle and low income people. And that's true. But what they don't say is, but the tax cuts I voted for the mega wealthy are permanent. And the tax cuts I voted for people in poverty and middle income expire automatically in a few years.
Right.
And that's one of those devil was in the details things that a lot of people to this day, when I bring it up, that was it, Bill, that it was. Donald is asking, do we have any thoughts on the recently ended Sanders presidential campaign? And has he had any impression on my decision to run for office and my personal platform? Oh my gosh. Donald, have you been to our website? If you go to our website, which is kimberlyforiowa.com, KIMBERLY for the whole word, FOR, Iowa.com, kimberlyforiowa.com. If you go and read our issues page, that is pretty much a mashup of Senator Warren and Senator Sanders policies. There's a few things on there that are kind of my own. I mean, nothing's new under the sun. When I say my own, I mean my own take on things. But, yes, Senator Sanders' candidacy and Senator Warren's as well greatly influenced my decision to run. And you know what? Nobody's ever asked me that, Donald, in that way. And sitting here thinking about it, I think it's safe to say that had Senator Sanders never run in 2016, I would not be running right now. And I probably wouldn't, because I wouldn't have thought that somebody like a regular person who isn't wealthy or well-connected to wealth or well-connected in political circles could run or should run. And then out of Senator Sanders' run for office came people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and came people like Cindy Axne, who was a manager, I believe in a consumer protection office here for the state of Iowa. Cindy Axne was not wealthy or well-connected to wealth, right? And she looked around and said, I'm going to step up for this, just like I did. She said, hey, if regular people don't step up and run, we get what we get, right? So I'm going to step up. And, we get people like Rashida Tlaib, and we get people like Deb Haaland and Sharice Davids. And we've got now this kind of growing critical mass of what I just kind of shorthand regular people who are now in positions of power in Congress, much to the chagrin of kind of old guard, wealthy, connected, want things to stay the way they are, people in power. I'm sure they're not too thrilled that the regular people are, as I often say, well, it's time to take our government back. Like we need to have true diversity of representation. And so when I say that, I really mean it. So I mean, yes, mega multinational corporations should have some voice because they're part of our fabric of our society, but they shouldn't have more voice than I do. They shouldn't have more voice than my 20-year-old son. They shouldn't have more voice than the 20-year-old single mom that I represent in court, right? Who doesn't have two dimes to rub together. They shouldn't have more say than that or more influence than that. And so we need diversity of everything in Congress. We need diversity of race and religion and background and culture. And we need diversity of income, right? We need diversity of income. We need people in Congress who know what it's like to live in poverty. Because until we have people in Congress who know what it's like to live in poverty, they're not going to actually have a really lived experience to then know what the piece of paper with the proposed legislation on it, how that's actually going to translate to somebody's real life, right? And somebody's everyday life. Tax cuts, Katie says tax cuts are permanent. Who can reverse them? Yeah, well, they're permanent until different legislation could override them. So we can change that and make them unpermanent. But the current bill that is currently law states that those tax cuts are permanent, until such time as some superseding legislation would come up. Maureen from Facebook asks, would universal basic income just feed trickle up? I think I know what you mean, Maureen. And if it's what I think it is, that is a little bit of my hesitation about UBI. I would rather see a minimum wage of $20 an hour. Do I think it's going to happen anytime soon? No, but I think $15 an hour probably will and should immediately. But the thing of it is, as Jessica was saying, if we had, say, a truly, truly living wage, which adjusted for inflation, $7.25 an hour, the current federal minimum wage would be about $20 an hour. So when we say $20 an hour, that might sound shocking, but $7.25 an hour sounded shocking at the time that was put into place.
And what 725 what that came out in 10 years ago in 2000.
Oh no, not longer ago than that.
725 was 2009, right?
I thought it was longer ago than that.
Well, either way, 725 in 2009 bought a specific amount of groceries, but 725 in 2020 doesn't buy the same amount of groceries. And so while the cost of living and inflation have increased, we, the working class, have been left behind. And that is what contributes to people continuing to have to live paycheck to paycheck, and even sometimes not even living paycheck to paycheck, because the money that they do make doesn't even cover the basics, cover the basics, which is why they have to then be on Medicaid or food stamps or receive HUD. And so, I mean, heaven forbid people have their basic needs met, have food. It's not a luxurious life living in poverty. I don't know a single person who receives government assistance that lives a luxurious life. Like, it's not something that people just kick back, relax, and, get these checks in the mail. I mean, like, a lot of these people that receive government assistance are working people, working 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. And that doesn't even cover all of it. Housing takes up, about half or more than, a single income would take. Transportation is expensive. Childcare is expensive. Healthcare is expensive. So, I mean, having a 725 minimum wage really is a death sentence into maintaining the status quo of keeping people below the poverty line.
Yeah. That's it. Maureen also asks about what's my stance on a total moratorium on rent, utilities, etc. Yeah, I think that we do need a total moratorium on rent, but here's the kicker. We also need a moratorium on mortgages, because you can't, believe it or not, and I can say this because I'm one of those people. So I own a home in Indianola, and in order to be able to afford to run for office and work less and cut back on my work schedule, I now live with my fiance. So I moved in with my fiance and I rent out my house in Indianola. And that's the only property I own is my house in Indianola. But I have a mortgage and I have massive student loan debt, and I'm not getting rich from renting out my house in Indianola. Believe me, it's just kind of keeping it there. And so if we're going to say nobody has to pay rent, we also need to say people that own property don't have to pay their mortgages during that time. And I think we should do that too. I mean, that only makes sense. This is not business as usual. This is a full-on crisis situation. And so I don't think that it's too much to do that. Same with utilities. I mean, we're just going to have to, give people several months of, would be my suggestion, if we're not going to do that, if we're not going to do a rent and mortgage and utilities moratorium, then we need to be just giving a UBI of maybe a couple $1,000s a month. I believe that's the number that Senator Sanders was suggesting and that he pushed for in the stimulus package and didn't get it. So yeah. Somebody says they live in Kentucky and his or her girlfriend makes $7.25 an hour. Yep. Let's see. Judy asks, is there a connection between increased military budgets and the decrease in funding for things people need like food stamps? That's a very good question, Judy. My gut feeling is, of course, yes, but I don't know that for a fact. And I hate to give inaccurate information. So unless I like literally had that statistic in front of me in writing or, pulled up on my computer, I wouldn't want to answer that definitively. My guess is yes. And the interesting thing about the military budget is, speaking of paycheck to paycheck, can we talk about service members for a minute? People that voluntarily are joining our military, that are voluntarily, potentially putting their lives on the line if they're sent to a war zone to represent our country. Some of them qualify for food stamps. That is how little we are paying our people that are enlisting in our military in some situations. Now it depends if you go in as an officer or, there's various pay, scales that you can enter the military in. I'm aware of that. But some of these people make so little money serving our country, and that should not be a thing. I would propose that we increase our service member pay for these people that are at these very low ends of the wage scale in our military. Nobody who's serving our country should be on the very, very low end of wages, period. That just shouldn't be allowed to happen. And, we also need to take care of veterans. We talk a good game about taking care of our veterans and how much we value our veterans. But at the end of the day, when we have so many homeless veterans and so many veterans that cannot find work for a variety of reasons, that aren't getting significant mental health treatment if they have suffered from PTSD, that aren't getting sufficient physical health treatment if they have something like lung issues from burn pits, and that's like something that has happened as a result of people serving in the Middle East, is my understanding. We've got to take better care of them. And we can both decrease the overall military budget and pay service members more and take care of our veterans better. It's not one or the other. And so I want to be very clear that I support military and veterans 100%. In fact, I would argue that I want to support them more than some people who just want to keep increasing the military budget, because what those people seem to do is just keep increasing the military budget and siphon off more of that money to private corporations, to the military industrial complex, to people that create munitions, to contractors who, especially for contractors that are working in combat zones. And that's that's why we have military people that are actual military, that are actually enlisted in our military. So we should not, in my opinion, be using private contractors for roles like that. We should be paying our actual enlisted military appropriately and utilizing their service. Amy asks, what about Amazon and other companies who pay zero in taxes? Do I think raising the top tax rate will solve the revenue problem to invest in people? I think it will go a long way towards solving it, Amy, and I don't think that people and multinational corporations like Amazon, like Walmart, should be able to get away with that, period. They just shouldn't. And further, it circles back to if they were paying living wages, then, that would help solve so many of these other problems, but they're not doing that. They're just pocketing more and more and more and more of the profits. And if we heavily tax, at some point, the money that's all circulating, wherever it comes from, becomes income to somebody at some point. And so if we're taxing income at a very high rate, but when I say tax income, I don't mean for lower and middle income people. I mean raising the top rates for people that have millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars per year in income. I'm not talking about anybody who's making 50,000 or 100,000 or even a couple 100,000 a year. I'm talking about extraordinarily wealthy people. If we appropriately tax that level, at those levels, then I think that we will have the money to invest. Will we really get the stimulus money? Carrie asks. I hope so. I certainly hope so. What were you going to say, Jessica?
What I was going to say is that the people at the top, whenever they obtain this wealth, they sit on it. They don't even utilize it. Whereas the working class people like us, whenever we earn money, we spend it. We put it back into our communities, and it becomes a cycle where we're all in this together. But whenever all of that wealth is hoarded in a specific people or businesses, it kind of cuts that off. And so people like us, like us who have money, spend money. We don't sit on it. We can barely save any money. So the money that we do have, we actually use and put back into the communities, whereas the other folks don't.
Right, exactly. And that goes back to what I said way earlier about investing in people. So when we invest in people, if that's financially, let's say that we pay a higher minimum wage, that money is not going to get saved in some offshore Swiss bank account, right? Or some offshore account. That's going to get spent right back into our communities. And by the way, I'd like to address another issue too. And in rural communities, a lot of times, understandably, people will say, look, I run this little coffee shop on the square in, Lamar's, Iowa, right? Some small town. I can't afford to pay my people $15 an hour. I am barely making the rent, paying my materials, and making a living myself as a business owner. I don't have extra money to, pay all my workers another $5 an hour, for example. And what I would suggest, my plan on that is totally understand. So let's make investments in those small businesses, whether they're, and I mean truly small businesses. I don't mean small business in the definition of the government, which is something like less than $10 million a year in revenue or something like that. I mean actual small, like micro businesses. If we stopped subsidizing Amazon and Walmart and Exxon and all these giant corporations, if we stopped subsidizing them and letting them get away with not paying taxes, and if we stopped giving them incentives and subsidies and so forth, and instead gave incentives and subsidies to small mom and pop, smaller businesses so that they in turn could afford to pay their workers $15 an hour, that becomes an upward spiral. They can afford to pay their workers more, so it spends more money into their community. So that whole community gets lifted up and there's more money circulating in that community, and people have a little bit higher standard of living in that community. So that's what I mean by making investments, is that we need to reprioritize and redirect where we are investing, because we're investing. And we've seen the results of it. In the last 40 years, we've invested hard and heavy in the top 10% of people that have wealth and income in this country. And it has paid off. They are wealthier than ever. And the rest of us, the rest of us are not doing so well. So.
What I was going to say about those small mom and pop shops, not just about like the living wage, is that I feel like small mom and pop shops should also support a single payer healthcare system. I think that this would be beneficial to the business. I know I support a single payer healthcare system because it's the ethically responsible thing to do. It's the fiscally responsible thing to do. And if small mom and pop shops are able to provide healthcare to their workers, if we pay for our healthcare through our taxes rather than our employers having to subsidize it and us pay the rest of it, blah, 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 that would help sustain and keep those small shops open for longer. And then also employees wouldn't have to worry about if they lose their job, if they would lose their coverage. no one should have to worry about those types of things. And so, and I know that you support a single payer healthcare system. And so I really value that about this campaign. And so I think that it really hits on a lot of, living this paycheck to paycheck. And if we were to be able to have a universal healthcare system, we would be living less, scrimping by. We would have access to care when we need it. And healthy people can be productive people. If people are sick, they can't be productive people in society. They can't love their families. They can't, have social lives. They can't have hobbies. They can't work. They can't do this and that if they're not well. And so it's really just beneficial all the way around for, I feel like, every aspect of our society.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, can you imagine the unleashing of entrepreneurship across this nation if people no longer felt they had to stay in a job they didn't maybe even really like and didn't want to be in, but they are in that job for one reason, basically, the health insurance, because they know if they go out and try to start a business that they maybe have wanted to start for 10 years, they've probably already priced how much their medical insurance is going to cost for their family of 4. And they found out it was going to be, $2,300 a month or $4,000 a month. I mean, those are real numbers. Like, plans are really that expensive if you just go purchase them as a small business and not if your employer is not paying part of it. And so they just look at that and go, I can't do this because I have a family and I can't have my children and my spouse be without medical insurance. So it would create and spur, I think, a lot of new businesses would be able to be created as well if we had a universal single payer. Again, it goes back to investment. These are investments. Zachary is asking about, we're told the answer to poverty is pursuing higher education. Excuse me, Zachary, while I laugh. Now, sometimes that's true. Sometimes that is true, and you do need a higher education, a specific degree to become a specific occupation that pays well. That's absolutely true sometimes. However, our current college system leaves many students with crippling loan debt. I'm currently a law student, having lost income from my part-time job as a result of COVID-19, and I'm worried about how students like me are going to continue financing our educations during the crisis and beyond. How would you reform our current college system to make these opportunities affordable and accessible to everyone? Yeah, Zachary. So I believe that higher education, trade schools included in that, very, very much so, trade schools, because side note, in about 20 years, we're not going to have enough plumbers, electricians, and welders and people like that, because a big chunk of those people doing those jobs right now are in their 50s and 60s. And we don't have a huge number of people coming up behind them in those trades. So we better get going and start training people to do those jobs, because we're going to be in a world of hurt pretty soon. Trade schools and college should be debt free, in my opinion. How exactly do we get there? I'm not sure I care that much. I mean, however we can get there, we get there, whether that's increasing Pell Grants to the point that anyone with financial need can get more than enough Pell Grants to pay the cost of their college and their books and their fees and all of that, so that they don't have any debt when they leave, or whether that's that we, have so-called tuition free, whether we go at it from that angle, whatever works. I don't pretend to be, I wish I could be an instant expert on everything. I'm not an expert on college financing and how, every puzzle piece of that and where they get their percentages of funding, and how most colleges, I know some is state and some get some, there's a lot, it's a patchwork of things, how Pell Grants exactly work, but we need to make that, sorry, Kat, we need to make that a reality. Absolutely. And I'll just give you the Reader's Digest version, Zachary, of my own situation, just so that you and everybody listening to this understands that I understand what you're saying about student loan debt. Okay. My parents divorced when I was 13, and I've been working since I was 14, and I worked my way through college, and I worked my way through law school. A lot of people, you obviously also are working through law school. At least when I went to law school 20 years ago, most of my law school classmates didn't work. They it's a lot of work to go to law school, as you know, Zachary. There's hours and hours and hours of reading that you have to do every single day. And so it's very difficult to do both, because law school is a full-time job for 3 years on its own. Well, and I've been working all through that, but I also took out loans because I went to Drake Law School, which is here in Des Moines, and it's a private law school and it's very expensive. And when I took out a little bit of loans for my undergraduate degree, still working during that time as well. And then I took out a huge amount of loans for law school. And so when I left law school, I had a total student loan debt of $80,000. And that's a lot of money, but at the time I was married to my son's father, had a 2-income household. And I thought, okay, we're just going to tighten our belt and we'll knock this out in 10 years. We'll get it paid back. Well, life happens, as it often does. We got divorced. I was now a single mother. I was representing children and families, which is a type of law that doesn't pay as much as many other types of law pay. And a combination of things, I entered into what is called income-based repayments. That means that you just pay payments according to your income. So once a year, I would tell Sally Mae, here's my income. And they would say, okay, here's your payment for the next 12 months. And then every year I renew that. And so I've done that for all those years. For 20 years, I've paid anywhere between $250 and $400 per month on my student loans. I left law school with $80,000 in student loans. Today, I owe $240,000 in student loans.
Ugh, that's awful.
And so no good deed goes unpunished. So the fact that I've spent 20 years, helping a lot of people with a lot of their real problems doesn't matter. And so you might say, well, that's okay. Doesn't that income-based repayment program come with a loan forgiveness component? Like after you make 20 or 25 years of payments, Kimberly, don't they forgive the balance? Yes. And I'm about to tell you something that no presidential candidate, not even Bernie Sanders, has ever talked about in public. Senator Warren didn't talk about it. Senator Sanders didn't talk about it. And I think it's because so many people don't even know about this. What happens is, yes, they will forgive the balance on your student loans at some point after 20 or 25 years, depending on which plan you're in. But then you owe regular income tax on the balance. So now you owe the IRS for, let's say, income tax on $300,000 of income. Because when they forgive that $300,000 in student loans, they send you a form that you file with your taxes, and it looks like you got $300,000 in income that year. And so now the IRS now can go about trying to collect the tax money that you don't have. So you're not in any better position at that point. So that is what has been allowed to happen to people that borrow money for their education in this country. How in the heck did that ever happen? A lot of people think that Sallie Mae and Navient are government agencies. They are private corporations. They are private corporations. That's how this happened. Those private corporations ingratiated themselves with politicians to the point that they got these devil is in the details clauses put into these various education loan programs that have allowed this to happen. And if you had more people who have student loan debt as sitting people in Congress, and I know of one off the top of my head, Eric Swalwell. He has about 200 or 100. Last time I heard him talk about it, he had about $100,000 in student loan debt. I don't know of very many other representatives or senators who have student loan debt. So they don't know anything about it. And that has got to change as well. So I get it, Zachary.
To that same topic, like Kimberly said at the beginning, I grew up in poverty. And so my parents filed for bankruptcy multiple times. I mean, we moved around a lot, it was not a good situation, but it was looking grim for me to be able to go to school because my parents didn't have any credit and they couldn't be co-signers on any loans for me to go to college. And so fortunately, I was very lucky in that my grandmother was able to co-sign for me, but it just shows that, you know, if people are willing and able to go to college and they want to better themselves and their communities, why are we preventing people from doing that? It shouldn't be a crime, and we shouldn't be punished for wanting to do those things, but, you know, to better ourselves in our communities. And so I just think that it's ridiculous that it feels like we're being punished for wanting to do those things. And to the student loan deal, the public service loan forgiveness, I am familiar with it because I'm part of it right now, helping to pay back my student loans. The thing with the public service loan forgiveness is that it's specific types of jobs. It's not just any job, it's very specific types of jobs. And like Head Start, early Head Start is part of that, specific kinds of teachers, specific kinds of librarians, depending on what population they serve or what area that they live in. And so firefighters, things like that. And so it's very specific. And so a lot of people assume that they're going to qualify for this when they're not. And there's paperwork and stuff that you have to do along the way to make sure you're qualifying for it. But the income-based pay is also very helpful. But I just wanted to say that it shouldn't be a crime for people to want to go to school and to better themselves in their communities. And we should want to help people be able to do those things. It's not
right.
It's not bad.
No, those are when you people through college or through trade school, they come out with no debt, then their income is now free to circulate in the community, right? They're going to buy a house, they're going to buy a car, they're going to go out to dinner, they're going to spend money in a restaurant. There are people that I've heard, you know, people have told me this over and over. I'm not buying a car, I'm not buying a house, and I'm not having children because I have too much student loan debt. I can't afford to do that. So that hurts housing, that hurts car manufacturers, and that hurts like local restaurants, and because people aren't going to go out and go to dinner when they don't have any extra money. And it really has a huge negative impact. We're going to wrap it up here pretty soon, but I will answer all your questions. I may not answer them here right now on this event because we're running out of time, but I will answer them all. We will take them down and I'll figure out, I'm not sure what the best way is to answer them. If we're going to like maybe get your email, or we have your email addresses, maybe we can send you the answers that way. Jason Snell, who, by the way, is our art director and communications person on our campaign and fantastic human being, asked, is there a connection between poverty and long-term health issues?
Oh, yeah.
that are currently contributing to higher risk of death from COVID-19? I wanted to address this, so I'm glad you asked this, Jason, because I specifically had a note to myself, actually, to address this exact issue tonight, because last night, I was watching a clip of a CNN, clip from talking about COVID-19 yesterday. I don't know if it was some doctor talking about what's happening or whatever. And the deaths from COVID-19 are skewing. So those of you who are on this call, probably most of you already know this, because you're probably pretty politically aware and act, this is the case. But just like the general population of the United States has a certain percentage of people of color, and then prison population in the United States has a super large disproportionate percentage of people of color, right? That same kind of thing is happening with COVID-19. Here's what I mean. People of color, and particularly African Americans, Black people, are dying from COVID-19 at a rate that is far. I didn't, unfortunately, because I just watched it literally last night and it was like 2 a.m. and I didn't write it down. But you can find statistics on this if you just go Google them right now. When the numbers, and P.S., by the way, Governor Kim Reynolds was asked about this at her press conference recently, whether we are keeping track in Iowa of the race of people who die from COVID-19. And I believe the answer was no. And we need to know, because if we don't understand history, we're doomed to repeat it. We need to know what is happening with this pandemic and who it is hitting the hardest. Now, I will tell you, nobody who knows anything about poverty is going to be shocked that people in poverty are going to be dying of this at a far greater rate than more affluent people and people with more financial resources. But there's a huge connection between the health of people who live in poverty and what not just the lack of money does, but what multiple traumas that result from living in poverty. So in other words, those of us like Jessica and I who work with kids, we know about something called an ACEs score. An ACEs score talks, an ACEs score is basically, you have literally a list of things that could happen to a child. And for everything that happens, you give a point, right? And then you can look at a chart and look at somebody's ACEs score. And it's things like, were they abused? Were they sexually abused? Were they verbally abused? Did they grow up in poverty? Did they live in a home with domestic abuse? Did they, did they have their bonding interrupted because when they were an infant or a toddler, they were removed from their primary caregiver for an extended period of time? And because of the systemic poverty and because of racism in this country that still exists so much, we have this situation where the ACEs scores of people in color are, in general terms, higher. And so we have got to address all of that. And that's a whole other show, as they say. And in fact, it is a whole other show. We're doing a Black Lives Matter forum, which is going to be co-hosted by Stacey Walker, who's the Lynn County supervisor. But we'll get into those issues at a more deeper level there. But yes, we should never talk, in my opinion, we should never talk about poverty without recognizing that the entire issue of poverty affects communities of color at a vastly disproportionate rate. And that has got to be addressed. And we don't have time to talk about how right now, but tune in for the Black Lives Matter Forum. And hopefully we will talk a lot more about that aspect when we get to that forum. And I'm sure that we'll touch on this in a lot of other forums that we're doing as well. And now I will I'm being told, I'm going to turn it over to Samantha Bucher. She's our campaign manager. And I will make sure those of you who I didn't answer your questions, I will answer them. So look for that. Hopefully I have your email if you registered for this event. If for some reason I don't have your email because you're talking to us on Facebook, just send me a private message or send me an email at Kimberly at KimberlyForIowa.com. Kimberly at KimberlyForIowa.com. Kimberly at KimberlyForIowa.com. And I will answer whatever question it was that you asked if I didn't get to it. So feel free to contact me. I will respond to you personally. I don't have staffers respond to constituents because that's my job. It's the job I want. So I will respond to you personally. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Samantha. Oh, wait, do I need to unmute you, Samantha?
You're good. I'm here.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. So as Kimberly said, Samantha here, campaign manager. I just wanted to duck in and there's one question in particular that came up on Facebook that I'd like to address really quickly. So that question was from Darvin Graham. I don't know if there's any relation. Probably not. But in any case, he asked, what's the pathway to victory like for your campaign now that things will have to remain digital between now and the primary? He also asked if there have been any talks about a debate or anything between now and June. So yes, there have been. And in fact, there's at least one upcoming event that will involve multiple candidates. And as far as the path to victory goes, I want to specifically address that this way. There's a few things that I think are really important to that. One, this campaign has the strongest digital presence of any of the campaigns currently running for this U.S. Senate seat. Starting at the very beginning of this campaign, we started a Twitter account with no followers, and now we have more followers than one of Joni Ernst's accounts. I think at last count, it was upwards of 46,000 followers there. We have a very, very dedicated core of volunteers that have been knocking on doors, at least they were previously, of course, before the pandemic. And we were the first campaign to begin direct voter contact through canvassing. We knocked thousands of doors, and those same volunteers are continuing to send thousands of texts and make thousands of phone calls. The other thing, too, is, as Kimberly will say often, the most important part of winning in Iowa is showing up. Kimberly personally went to, and any of our staff also went to, at least 85 counties. And we had virtual town halls after the pandemic began in the remaining counties in the state, talking to people everywhere. And none of the other candidates have to date achieved that. And that's one of the things that is really important to not only winning the primary, but also beating Joni Ernst, because there are going to be times, in the general election where whoever is going to be the nominee is going to have to go everywhere and talk to everyone, because just staying in the cities, virtually or otherwise, is not going to cut it. So that said, there's one other thing that I want to mention, which is that we back at the beginning of March, the Des Moines Register and Mediacom ran a poll of over 800 Iowans about the U.S. Senate race. And they determined that this campaign, that Kimberly Graham has not only the highest name recognition of all the Democrats that are running for this U.S. Senate seat, but also the highest favorability. So that's our path to victory. We have the strongest volunteer team, which I'm now going to ask you to join. You can go to kimberlyforiowa.com and click the volunteer link. Please sign up to join us. You can make texts, you can make phone calls, you can help us with fundraising, and there's various other ways you can help as well. So I'd really strongly encourage you to do that. The other thing I want to quickly mention is that this campaign is a purely grassroots campaign. Unlike some of the other candidates in this race, we aren't taking any corporate money from lobbyists or PACs, and we also are not self-funding like one of the other candidates has been able to do to the tune of $1.5 million. Still, another candidate received over $1 million of assistance from the super PAC. Our average donation is $25, and that's what we've had this entire time. And that means that every single donation of $1, $5, and even those who currently have been struck down by the COVID-19 pandemic, you folks, take care of yourselves, take care of your families. But if those of you who have the means to do so can contribute to this campaign, we'd really appreciate your support, especially on behalf of those who currently cannot. You can also do that at kimberlyforiowa.com, and we'll make sure to leave a link below. Finally, I just want to say that we have a few other upcoming panels and forums. There will be full schedule posted on our social media. The nearest upcoming events are tomorrow, April 5th, we have a forum on mental health, and that's going to be at 3:30 p.m. Central Time. We'll also be doing an online Q&A and town hall with J.D. Schulten from the 4th District. He's running for Congress there, and that'll be at 6 p.m. And then on Saturday, we're going to have our first immigrant roundtable discussion on issues of immigration at 11 a.m. So please look at those and join us for those events. We have a very long list of upcoming events as well on various topics that you would most certainly be interested in. So I'd encourage you to take a look at those. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful night. Stay home, stay safe, and thanks for joining us.
Bye, everybody. I'm going to hold on. I'm going to be here for just a second because I want to address Amy's question. Amy, can you still hear me? Can you type, Amy, if you can?
I think she just wrote on Zoom, so I think she's available.
Okay. Do we have her email? Does anybody know?
Yeah, Kimberly, Samantha here. We can get the email for Amy and the other participants as well.
For Amy? Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea what's. Bye, Gary. I don't know what happened with Amy, but that's really bizarre. I'll go look through the Facebook page and make sure that I don't see any questions from her that didn't get answered, because that's strange, because I usually answer them myself. So All right. Well, thanks everybody. I really appreciate everybody being here and appreciate your support. And we'll see you maybe tomorrow night for the mental health forum or Saturday for the immigration forum or any of our other forums coming up here. Thanks a lot. And thank you, Jessica. I really,
Thank
really
you.
appreciate you being here. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you for inviting me. Bye.
Sure. We'll talk to everybody later. Bye-bye.